There are some fabulous and mega popular dermatologists online, and if I were into views, I'd be interviewing one of them right now. But I am interested in who the scientists are who toil away in labs, figuring out what really works and is safe among the treatments that companies try to sell us and dermatologists recommend. For that, we go inside a lab at Harvard to meet Mandinova. Her papers are widely admired, but she's never had time for social media.
So you said something that really caught my attention, which is that skin creams, 99% of them work on hydrating the cells to cause the cells to expand, but they don't actually have a long-term effect on the skin? Or how does that work?
When you get to your favorite skincare routine, your favorite skin cream, what is very exciting for you usually is that within the first week of use, you see a change. And that's what we like. That's what most of the consumers actually want. But let me explain to you what that really means. Probably 99%, even if not all of skin cream provide hydration. That's actually good. Hydration is good because as we age, we start to lose moisture of our skin. But what does hydration of the skin means in terms of appearance? When you look at the mirror, imagine a cell which is starting to shrink a little bit because it's losing moisture. All of a sudden you provide moisture. Boom! It expands. And when it expands, it levels your skin and also it covers things. It covers spots, it covers dilated blood vessels, redness, and it's really just a cover. It doesn't affect actual skin health. And that's what our goal should be.
I see. So as soon as you stop using it, you look bad again. So you go to Costco and buy another tube of it.
Correct.
Skincare products it must be an enormous market. Let's start with sunscreens. They're fairly complicated too, right? I mean, there's mineral sunscreens. So when I was growing up, I was a caddy at a country club as a kid. I always had a burned, scabby nose, and then I skied and had a burned, scabby nose. And eventually somebody convinced me to put on zinc oxide. So I went around with a white nose all the time. And that prevented me from getting a red, scabby nose. And now there's mineral sunscreens, but they don't visibly reduce the light, but the minerals somehow block the UV?
That is correct. Currently, the sunscreens we have, the broad spectrum sunscreen, they block both types of UV light, UVA and UVB, and that's important. And they work fairly well, but our relationship with sunscreen is a funny one. Every one of us knows that they should put sunscreen. Those who do it, many will do it and forget about it. It doesn't work that way. Unfortunately, we haven't found the sunscreen in a pill which you take once a week and it works. You have to be diligent and put it every hour.
Every hour?
Even every hour.
Every hour.
I know that the rule is every 2 hours, but part of the sunlight, part of the spectrum of the sunlight is so dangerous. UV light, correct. We should be overprotecting ourselves. Here, I am an advocate for overprotection, complete advocate for overprotection. Also because staying in the sun is addictive. It's been shown scientifically by excellent scientific group here on this floor. Similar to opioids, sunlight is addictive.
So that's how sunbathing becomes your drug of choice?
Yes.
You go to the beach and you lie on the beach. And the UV lights, the artificial UV lights, the tanning salons?
The same.
Addictive.
They are the same.
Do they give you the same UV exposure as the beach does, or is it higher?
It depends. That industry put a lot of protections in, but...
What kind of protections?
They change the spectrum which UV you're exposed to, that there are no burns. However, it's very simple. If you tan, your DNA is damaged. It's as simple as that. There is no tanning without damage of the DNA, cancerous damage of the DNA.
When you get a tan, it's an injury response to DNA damage. A lot of people think of skin injury solely as it relates to sunburn, and that is what they're hoping to get away from with the tan. But they're replacing one form of skin injury with another. The tanning bed just gives you a really, really high deadly doses of UVA rays, which lead to premature aging, suppress the immune system, and skin cancer. In fact, it is estimated that indoor indoor tanning is responsible for around 419,000 skin cancers a year.
So I have all kinds of dermatology problems. I've had 6 skin cancer operations. I have a skin graft on the side of my nose there. So I have to see the dermatologist all the time, every 6 months. I have fair freckled skin, I have a reddish mustache, I have blue eyes. I've lived my life in the sun doing Ironman competitions where the sunscreen sweats off and you swim it off or whatever, and I get burned. So not only do I talk to dermatologists, but I watch them on YouTube and they get millions of views. And I always wonder if they really know what they're talking about. How much misinformation is there out there when you're watching the internet and listening to dermatologists? Do you ever cringe? Do you ever watch them? Do you know how well educated they are?
We have to give credit to the dermatologist because the dermatology office is the place diagnosing and curing the most cancers in the world. So there is no other place which discovers and cures more cancer than the dermatologist.
And you're saying that because skin cancer is so prevalent compared to other cancers?
And because it's visible. Because when you go to the dermatologist, they can see it. That's huge. They don't get much credit for that. That also needs to be said because they're not oncologists. They don't really cure the deadly metastatic cancer, but they prevent it from becoming one.
I see.
And that's important. That's why skin checks are important, annual skin checks. And that's why visiting the dermatologist is important. At the same time, what we have to remember is that the actual discoveries which are changing skin health and are finding ways to diagnose and cure cancer are done on the bench.
By skin scientists like yourself.
Skin scientists.
So you know how the sausage is made.
Right. When I get really on the verge of intervening with my strong opinion is when I hear someone say, oh, I saw on the internet, this works great for skin. Or, oh, I heard in this forum, a dermatologist said that you should use this or this. We live in a world where evidence matters. That means that we go deep into science. We learn what skin scientists do because they look at these stem cells. They know how they function. And then we go to the next level where we have these large trials. This is evidence-based dermatology. Not a single person did that or works, or not a single dermatologist said, well, I have a patient who used this and this and never got cancer. This is not what we should be doing.
No anecdotes.
Yes.
Anecdotes are everywhere on the internet. Consumers seem to love them. So what do you say to people who say, yeah, but applying sunscreen every day, these dermatologists who make you apply sunscreen every day, they end up harming your health because the sun has other beneficial effects?
Like everything is, you have to put it on the scale. It's a simple risk-benefit analysis.
I see.
Let's talk about the benefits of the sun. This is why sunlight is addictive. Evolutionary, we had to look for the sun to make vitamin D. Because without vitamin D, we wouldn't survive. So we were programmed to look for the sun, and that's why we feel good when we are under the sun.
My dermatologist says, for someone like me, I have to put sunscreen on first thing in the morning because in the house, I sit by a window and things like that, and UV comes streaming in the window. I notice my photos on the wall are all faded when they're close to the window from UV light. And those are supposed to be UV protected photos, just like I'm supposed to be UV protected with sunscreen. So car windows, do you put the UV protection shields on your car windows? Or?
What we have to take into consideration is what type of skin do you have? Mine is not that sensitive, so I'm not that careful, but people with really fair skin like yourself, I would be. Because again, overprotection is here justified.
Your window glass can filter out UVB, but not so much UVA, and that's why I made a TikTok the other day that you should wear sunscreen in the car, because a lot of my American patients have more photo-aging skin cancers on the left side of their face, whereas my UK or Australian patients might have more sun damage on the right side of their face, and I see that in clinic very much so, and also left arm, right arm.
So for example, there's a famous photo of a truck driver. He drove a truck with the windows closed for about 28 years. The left side of his face received direct sun, the right side received indirect sun. and you can see the massive difference in wrinkles.
So diet, carotenoids that you get from carrots and things like that, they make your skin a little bit orange. I understand you can get up to a fair-skinned person like me if you eat a lot of fruits and vegetables and things. You can get an SPF factor maybe of 2 or something like that. Is that about right?
Something like that, yeah. But I'm someone who tell you that you're still at big risk with 2.
So if you can imagine an SPF of 2, it sort of means that it will take twice as long to burn. And 4 is 4 times as long to burn.
SPF in the United States is only calculated based on how much UVB gets blocked, since we really only knew about UVB's risks when making the standards. So if you wear SPF 30, the general idea is that your skin absorbs about 30 times less UVB than it would without sunscreen.
What this means is that in general, a higher SPF is going to give you better UVA protection. Australian and EU sunscreens also give you better guaranteed protection than a US sunscreen. One recent study did find that US sunscreens give less protection. Out of the 20 sunscreens tested in this study, 19 of them passed the US test, but only 11 of them passed the EU regulation.
But in general, products that are formulated outside of the United States are going to be using these newer filters. But people are, I think, concerned because they're like, oh, this doesn't have FDA approval, so is it safe? But it couldn't be further from the truth. These newer actives actually have been tested at much higher standards. I use pretty much exclusively for my daily sunscreen, Korean sunscreens, because the United States has really backwards sunscreen laws. We have come so much further in the development of new sunscreen actives. The newer actives that we don't have in the United States but are popular in Europe and Asia, they are photostable, they're non-greasy, they're non-irritating, they don't get absorbed by your skin, they don't get into your bloodstream. I think SPF doesn't matter as much as coverage and durability. There isn't as good of a rating system for how long sunscreen stays on your skin, and that's sort of a problem. So some sunscreens wipe off very easily, and this is a problem that I had with some of the Japanese sunscreens that I was using, is that they just weren't durable. They wiped off super easily. So even though they were high SPF, they would come off almost immediately.
So what do you say to people who say skin creams cause cancer? They're toxic, and you should be afraid of them.
I would say that I've studied for 20 years now epidermal biology, which is where you get cancer. I have seen with my eyes how sunlight damages the DNA. I haven't seen on my watch durable, reproducible, and that's important. That's one of my favorite words, reproducible damage from sunscreen or skin creams. I'm not saying I'm a scientist. I would never say it doesn't exist. But the sunlight damage is so prevalent, is so massive, undisputable, and we've mapped now every single step of cancer development in the skin, that it's such a convincing story that it really forces us to reach protection. So diet matters, of course. I would say it matters more for general skin health than for sun protection.
What do you mean by that?
So
prevent wrinkles and things? Texture of the skin. My laboratory does, and I think what you see here is probably part of that project even. So we study what type of nutrients are more beneficial for the skin. What type of nutrients actually promote the ability of the skin, of the epidermis, the top layer, to renew every 4 weeks and then build the full-blown multiple layer structure. Because what happens when you age, a hallmark of aging skin is thinning of the epidermis. So the epidermis has, 6-7 layers of cells. Top of those layers are dead cells, and this is our barrier. And as we age, the epidermis tends to thin, so less and less layers. We ask the question why, and we believe, based on what we've studied, is that these stem cells, which are at the bottom, are starting to get tired. So they don't have the proper nutrients and elements around to really be able to now produce the 6-7 layers. They're still doing well, but they're going for 4 or 5 layers. And that's enough for your skin to start to look thin. Now, your barrier function is disrupted. So
toxins and other elements start to get in, chronic inflammation starts to be prevalent. So we strongly believe here in my lab, and I think many of our colleagues, that your diet is actually able to bolster the ability of a tired skin stem cell to get more energy and produce the necessary layers.
With carotenoids, they're the pigments that make a lot of fruits and vegetables the color that they are. So beta carotene makes carrots orange and lycopene makes tomatoes red. And there is a whole spectrum of carotenoids. And the cool thing about carotenoids is that when you consume them, we accumulate them in the fat underneath our skin, and it can change the color of our skin. And it's subtle, but that subtle change in color makes a huge difference in terms of how healthy you appear to other people. And there's a lot of literature on this where they apply these transformations to look at more or less carotenoid colored images, and people find carotenoid colored images of people, regardless of the race of the person in the picture or the person perceiving the images, they find carotenoid color to be more attractive. And this is really fascinating because it's almost as if we're displaying the richness of our diet on our skin.
That actually goes back to our initial conversation about moisturizers. What a skincare product should actually do is exactly that. It should provide more nutrients and more energy to the basal layer of the epidermis.
How does it get down that low?
I'll get to that. So that it now produces all the layers. Your skin starts to look younger because the texture changes. So when I said that, when you look at the mirror within the first week of skincare use and you say, wow, that worked, that's not what you should be concerned. You should look at your skin 6 to 8 weeks after you started the product, and you should say, wow, now after 6 weeks, I see additional change. I see not only this moisturizing effect, but I see a durable change. That's the goal. That's a good skincare product.
I see.
Back to your question, how does it get there? That's the problem. And that's what we've been struggling with for decades, because the skin is designed not to let it get through it. So 2 questions in skincare. Compounds, which really boost the energy of the stem cells. And number 2, how do they get there? There are a lot of new technologies on formulation of skincare products, and actually skincare companies are doing a lot on that. Are they successful? I would say we are on the right track, but a long way to go. This is why more invasive, more drastic measures usually work better, such as microneedling, device-assisted skincare like lasers.
Microneedling is where you poke thousands of little holes in someone's skin. It sounds great, doesn't it? But it actually has some really unique benefits. So the different devices that we have options out there, we can control the depth. You can go to like 0.5 millimeter, which is going to basically just break the epidermis layer of the skin, to all the way down to like 8 millimeters. I think like the Morpheus 8 gets all the way down to like 8 millimeters on some of the hand pieces, which is outrageously high. But most of the time we're dealing between 0.5 millimeters in depth and 2 millimeters in depth, depending on what you're trying to target. But ultimately, by poking holes in the skin, it creates a controlled damage. And by doing that, it activates those wound healing factors in your skin and does what we call collagen induction.
We know that the skin is first and foremost, like Dr. Shaw said, a barrier. And half the battle of using active ingredients is actually getting them into and through the skin to be effective.
So the number one thing that actually stops your skincare products from reaching into the dermis or in the lower layers of the epidermis where you actually want to see the benefits of them is that stratum corneum layer of the skin. And so by puncturing it, you can introduce new ingredients into the skin as long as you're being careful. Microneedling is actually something where there has been tons of research on it. So there's like hundreds of papers on the benefits of microneedling. So you can pretty much count on it being an effective thing for your skin.
A laser is technically a single wavelength of light that targets an endpoint. And usually the endpoint is one of 3 things: red blood cells for redness, pigmentation for brown spots, and water for collagen production. I've always said that the complement of the 2 is the perfect marriage, because what you can't get from skincare, you get from a boost from in-office laser treatments. But laser treatments alone are never going to give you long-term results if you're not doing your part at home with skincare.
How come Oprah looks so beautiful at 70? She looks like she's 30.
It's not just her. There are many individuals like that.
It's great that you look like a teenager.
Well, I'm not a teenager at all, but I will have to say.
And I get this question very often. And my answer is they are procedures which are very successful.
Laser treatments make up a large part of my cosmetic practice. When you do these prejuvenation lasers, you are fortifying the skin, so it's going to be less prone to wrinkling and crinkling, so you might be able to stave off Botox a little bit. But if you're at the point where you're starting to see etched in lines in the forehead or in your scowl lines, that's not going to get a whole lot better from lasers because you're going to continue to make those movements. They're not being prevented, and so you're going to keep etching in those lines. But combining some small Botox injections with a series of prejuvenation lasers can do wonders for the skin. That's really popular in my office. I treat a lot of younger patients who are really invested in optimizing their skin, and that combo is such a win. Redness treatment is something that is very near and dear to my heart as someone who has rosacea and who has personally undergone numerous laser treatments to improve it. I do Clear and Brilliant on myself quarterly. When I do my Botox, I also do my Clear and Brilliant.
Microcoring is otherwise known as microexcisional skin removal. It involves making tiny little punches in the skin using an energy-free needling device. It's removing up to 8% of the skin, and what that does is it has a tightening effect, but it also stimulates collagen production and elastin production. So the end result is skin tightening and subtle, soft improvement in fine lines and wrinkles through induction of collagen synthesis.
So I did an interview with the surgeon who removed my various lesions, and he said, I go out unprotected in the mornings and the evenings. I'm a surfer in San Diego, and I feel like the spectrum of light at that time of day is actually probably a little bit healthy. I just don't go out when the UV index is over 1 or 2, something like that. I just check that. Any feelings about that? I've heard somebody say that UVA is still pretty high in the evening and the morning, but it's UVB that goes away in the early morning.
I would say that definitively is less dangerous, to the point that when we do our risk-benefit analysis, it's starting to get on the verge of maybe even, but a huge factor would be type of skin.
So not me.
Not you. Probably me.
He's Filipino, and so I guess they're half Hispanic, half Asian.
Yes.
So he has dark skin.
Yes. There is no one size fits all. It has to be a very conscious choice of the individual. I think we can make those.
So I've been bothered about how much we're learning about how significant UVA is in both skin aging and in skin cancers, and yet how focused we still are on UVB. The SPF factor is exclusively focused on UVB, and the UV index, which you see on your weather app, is dominated by UVB. And we're finding out that American sunscreens are not as effective at blocking UVA. Here's a graph of the amount of UVA in the atmosphere versus UVB from a scientific paper. I'll clean it up for you. It's at the latitude of Dublin, Ireland, on the longest day of summer when the sun comes up at 5 a.m. The horizontal scale is time of day. The left vertical scale is the relative amount of radiation. They assigned a 1 for peak radiation at noon and 0 for no radiation at midnight. The red line is UVA. Note that by 6 a.m. it has already reached 30% of its max for the day, compared to UVB, the blue line, which is at less than 10% of its max for the day at that time. So the actual amount of UV landing on us is maybe 3 times what our weather apps are telling us. Not only that, but look at the scale on the right. What it's telling us is the ratio of UVB to UVA is small, meaning 95% of the UV radiation we get is UVA. And I'm seeing disturbing recent papers claiming that human squamous cell tumors contain more fingerprint mutations from UVA than UVB. We know tanning beds filter out UVB, and yet the number of young adults whose deaths are attributed to tanning beds is tragic. I know, we just published an episode about the health benefits of infrared light, and that a good time to get it is before the UV index gets too high. But infrared penetrates clothes and sunscreen, so you can wear a hat and sunscreen in the morning and still get infrared. I don't promote any products on my channel, and I don't even accept freebies or donations, but I have to say, even I am using Korean sunscreens too, and I love them.
The fact that so many people get squamous cell carcinoma makes the actual number of people who die on squamous cell carcinoma huge. And we believe that in the next 10 years, the number of patients which are dying on metastatic squamous cell carcinoma of the skin is going to reach the number of patients which are dying of melanoma.
Wow, that's crazy.
It has been shown that the renewal of your epidermis, or the top layer of the skin, happens during the night. And it's part of our circadian rhythms. And that makes sense because this is when you are not being damaged by the sun, right? You give time, your skin to repair, and then it starts to proliferate. Otherwise, cancerous cells will multiply.
How long does it take at night, do we know?
It depends. It's usually takes the whole night. But now when you change time zones, all of a sudden, it takes time for you to change your circadian rhythms. And all of a sudden, in the first couple of days, your cells are multiplying while you might be in the sun. So that's dangerous.
So I stayed up till 1 a.m. reading your papers last night. So you're saying I won't look as good on the camera today because I didn't give it enough time to replenish?
No, what I'm saying is that maybe 4 weeks from now, you're going to because it takes that long.
Oh, I see.
For the appearance.
I see. Oh, fascinating.